The morning the auction bell rang, Eli Mercer stood at the edge of the town square with sawdust, still clinging to his boots and the smell of pine. Resin soaked into his clothes, a man shaped by forests and solitude rather than crowds and judgment. He had come down from the mountains only to sell lumber. Nothing more. Yet the sound of that bell, sharp, metallic, final, cut through him like a blade. In Dust Creek, bells meant land, cattle, debts, or women. Eli had learned long ago not to stay when that bell rang. But this time his feet refused to move. He was 34, broad-shouldered, scarred along the hands and jaw, with eyes that had seen winters no one else survived. The town knew him only as the lonely lumberjack, the man who lived where wolves outnumbered people, the man who spoke little and drank less, the man no woman ever waited for. He had buried his parents in the same winter, lost his brother to a falling tree, and learned that silence was safer than hope. As townsfolk gathered, men with coins and crooked intentions, women watching with tight mouths and lowered eyes, Eli felt something twist in his chest, a warning he didn't yet understand. They brought her out without ceremony, as if she were no more than a sack of grain. She wore a faded brown dress too thin for the cold, sleeves patched at the elbows, hands trembling though she tried to keep them folded neatly. Her hair was hidden beneath a simple scarf, but loose strands escaped, catching the light. She was young, younger than she should have been for such a fate. Her face pale yet unbroken, eyes dark with something deeper than fear, memory. The auctioneer cleared his throat. An old man with a voice worn smooth by cruelty disguised his routine, and began listing her as one might list livestock. No family, no dowry, no protection, the men murmured. Some laughed. Eli's jaw tightened. He had seen death in the mountains, had dragged men from beneath fallen trees and watched life drain from their eyes. But this felt worse. This felt chosen. The bidding began slow, almost bored. $1, laughter. Another man raised 2 fingers, mocking. $2. Eli felt his hand move before his mind agreed. He stepped forward, the crowd turning, surprised to see the mountain ghost among them. He placed 2 silver coins on the table, their clink louder than the bell had been. "That's enough," he said quietly. The auctioneer hesitated, then shrugged. No one challenged him. No one wanted her enough to pay more. When the hammer fell, the sound echoed like a gunshot. It was done. The woman flinched. Eli didn't look at her at first. He stared at the coins, suddenly aware that he had bought a life without knowing why. The crowd dispersed quickly, appetite satisfied, interest gone. Whispers followed him. Why would a man like that want a wife? But he ignored them. He turned at last, meeting her eyes, and saw something that made his breath catch. Not gratitude, not relief, but guarded caution, as if she expected the cruelty to continue under a different name. "You're free," he said, the words strange on his tongue. "I won't force you." She blinked, clearly not believing him. He offered his coat, thick wool worn soft by years of storms. She hesitated, then accepted, fingers brushing his hand. The contact was brief, electric, and unsettling. He had not touched another person in years. They left Dust Creek together as the sun dipped low, walking rather than riding, because Eli had only brought 1 horse and she seemed afraid of them. The road out of town was long and quiet, stretching toward the mountains where the air grew thinner and cleaner. He told her his name, Eli Mercer. He told her where they were going, a cabin deep in the pines, miles from anyone else. She said nothing. Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. As dusk turned the sky violet, she finally spoke, her voice soft and steady despite everything. "Why did you buy me?" The question struck deeper than he expected. He thought of loneliness, of empty winters, of waking each morning to nothing but echoes, but those felt selfish. "Because no one else should," he answered. It was the only truth he trusted. Night fell fast in the mountains. By the time they reached his cabin, stars crowded the sky like witnesses. The place was small but solid, built by his own hands, smoke curling from the chimney. Inside it was warm. He lit a lamp, set water to boil, and showed her where she could sleep, his bed, while he took a blanket near the fire. She watched him closely, suspicion slowly giving way to confusion. "You don't have to stay," he said. "When morning comes, if you want to leave, I'll walk you back to town." She swallowed. "I have nowhere else." Those words landed like a confession. He nodded, understanding too well what it meant to have no direction left. Later, as the fire burned low and the wind whispered through the trees, She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers clenched in the quilt. "There's something you should know," she said. Eli looked up. "My name isn't what they told the auctioneer." He waited. In the mountains, patience was survival. She took a breath, eyes glistening in the lamplight, and spoke a name that made his blood run cold, a name he had not heard, spoken in over 10 years, a name tied to a past soaked in loss and unanswered questions. The moment stretched, fragile and dangerous, as if the cabin itself were holding its breath. Eli rose slowly to his feet, heart pounding, the walls of his carefully built solitude beginning to crack. He realized then that buying her freedom had not ended his loneliness. It had summoned his past, standing in his doorway, wearing a woman's face and a name that could change everything. The name she spoke did not echo in the cabin, yet it struck Eli harder than any falling tree ever had. It carried the weight of graves dug with frozen hands, of blood-darkening snow, of promises broken by fate rather than choice. For a long moment he could not speak, could only stare at her as the fire cracked softly behind him. She flinched, mistaking his silence for anger, perhaps regret, perhaps the violence she had been taught to expect from men who paid coins for ownership. But Eli did not move toward her. He moved away, pressing a hand against the rough log wall as if the cabin itself might steady him. He remembered that name spoken by his brother in laughter, by his mother in prayer, by a dying man in apology. He remembered the night everything ended and the mountains swallowed the truth. "That's not possible," he finally said, his voice low, hoarse. She met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw not deception, but the exhaustion of someone who had been running for years. "I wish it weren't," she replied. "But it's mine." Sleep did not come easily to either of them. Eli lay near the fire, staring into embers that became memories whether he wanted them to or not. She lay awake too, listening to the wind claw at the walls, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake by speaking the truth. When dawn came, pale and cold, it brought with it the fragile promise of choice. Eli rose first, chopping wood with more force than necessary, breath steaming in the air. She watched from the doorway, wrapped in his coat, seeing not a brute, but a man wrestling ghosts. When he finally turned to her, his eyes were calmer, resolved. "You're not my enemy," he said, "but your name carries danger. Men died because of it." She nodded. "Men still hunt it." That was when he understood. She had not been sold because she was unwanted. She had been sold because she was being erased. Over the days that followed, a rhythm formed between them, cautious but real. She helped inside the cabin, learned the paths around it, fed the fire the way Eli showed her. He taught her how to hold an axe safely, how to spot a storm before it arrived, how to listen to the forest instead of fearing it. In return, she spoke slowly at first of a childhood torn apart by greed and power, of men who used the law like a weapon, of how her name tied her to something valuable enough to kill for. Eli listened without judgment. The mountains had taught him that survival often looked like silence. But peace did not last. One evening, as the sun bled red through the trees, Eli found tracks near the creek, booted, careful, recent. The past had followed them into the wilderness. He did not tell her at first. He hoped he was wrong. He hoped the mountains would swallow the threat as they always had. But hope was a luxury he could not afford. When riders appeared on the ridge 2 days later, silhouettes against the sky, he knew the truth. She saw them too. Fear flashed across her face, followed by something harder, determination. "I won't run again," she said. Eli shook his head. "You won't have to." He had built his life around endurance, around protecting what little he had. Now that little included her. He prepared the cabin, barred the windows, set traps he had not used since the winter wolves came. When night fell, the riders came closer, voices carrying through the trees, confident, careless. They thought him a hermit. They thought her property. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Words were exchanged, names spoken like threats. Eli stood in the doorway, rifle steady, heart clear. He did not fight for money nor for pride. He fought because some things, once found, could not be surrendered. When it was over, the forest was quiet again, reclaiming what violence left behind. Eli was wounded, blood soaking into the snow, but alive. She knelt beside him, hands shaking as she pressed cloth to his side, tears freezing on her lashes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk everything?" He smiled weakly. "Because I already lost everything once," he said. "I won't do it again." Spring came slowly, but it came. The danger passed. Word spread, as it always did, but it spread differently now. The lonely lumberjack was no longer alone. The woman with the dangerous name was no longer hiding. Together they chose a future neither had believed possible. One morning, standing beneath tall pines with sunlight filtering through, she took his hand. "I want to keep my name," she said. "Not as a burden, as a truth." Eli squeezed her fingers. "Then we'll face it together." And in that moment, the mountains, which had taken so much, gave something back. If you've stayed until the end of this story, if you believe that even the loneliest hearts can find redemption, subscribe to the channel for more powerful Wild West tales where love, courage, and destiny collide.